All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. You know how much we love to get into the nitty-gritty of, well, pretty much anything that sparks our curiosity.
And today is no exception.
Not at all. We're talking about the UK's most expensive cities.
A topic that's sure to resonate with anyone who's ever dreamed of living across the pond, or maybe just anyone who's curious about the realities of UK city life these days.
Exactly. And to guide us through this financial maze, we've got a really interesting video script that breaks down the top 5 priciest places.
Buckle up, because we're heading to London, Edinburgh, Oxford, Cambridge, and Bristol. Some pretty iconic spots.
Big names indeed, and each with its own distinct charm and, well, price tag. Let's start with the obvious one.
Oh, you mean London?
Yeah, I gotta address the elephant in the room, right. London, the UK's capital, global powerhouse, and yeah, infamous for its cost of living.
Infamous is putting it mildly. I mean, when you think about expensive cities around the world, London is always right up there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, just to give you an idea, the average rent for a one-bedroom flat in London is around, get this, £2,500 per month.
Per month, and that's before you even factor in transport, groceries, entertainment, the whole shebang.
Yeah, our source actually called London's living costs sky high. Like, even compared to other global cities, it's up there. So the question is why? What makes London so expensive?
Well, I think a big part of it is demand. London attracts people from all over the world. You've got professionals, artists, students, everyone wants a piece of the action. But London is also a really densely populated city.
Right, there's only so much space.
Exactly. Limited space for new development. Yeah. And that scarcity drives up property values and rental costs. It's basic economics.
So it's like this perfect storm, right? Tons of people want to be there, but there's not enough space, which drives up prices. But what about what London has to offer?
You mean all the things that make it so attractive in the first place?
Exactly. Like our source talked about world-class museums, theaters, the whole buzzing social scene.
Oh, yeah. London's cultural scene is definitely a huge part of its appeal.
And I'm guessing people are willing to pay a premium to be close to all that?
Absolutely. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more desirable a city becomes, the more expensive it gets.
Which kind of makes you wonder, who can actually afford to live comfortably in London?
It's a good question.
I mean, the source even made this joke. They said London is the city that never sleeps, but it's also the city that never stops costing you money.
Very true. It's definitely something to think about.
Okay, well, maybe we'll find a more affordable option as we go down the list.
Let's hope so.
But for now, let's shift gears a bit and journey north to Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, Scotland's capital.
And according to our source, a city full of breathtaking architecture, rich history, and of course, those famous festivals.
It's a place that really captures the imagination, doesn't it?
Definitely. But I have a feeling this beauty comes at a price, too.
You'd be right. While not quite as expensive as London, Edinburgh is still the second most expensive city in the UK.
Okay, so spill the beans. What are we looking at rent-wise?
Well, the average rent for a one-bedroom flat in Edinburgh is around £1,300 per month.
£1,300 a month. So yeah, significantly lower than London, but still a hefty chunk of change.
Oh, for sure. Especially when you consider average UK salaries.
And you know what's interesting? Our source mentioned that rent prices in Edinburgh actually spike during the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Have you heard of that?
Oh, absolutely. It's huge.
I mean, I know it draws massive crowds, but that really affects the housing market.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The Fringe Festival brings in artists, performers, tourists from all over. It creates a huge demand for short-term accommodation, and that definitely pushes up prices.
Wow, so it's not just the long-term trends, but these temporary events can really impact the market too.
Exactly. It's a good example of how dynamic these markets can be.
For sure. But, beyond the cost, I'm curious, what makes Edinburgh so special?
Well, I think it's that unique mix of old and new.
What do you mean?
Well, you've got the historic Royal Mile, the iconic Edinburgh Castle, but also a really vibrant modern art and culture scene.
So you're stepping back in time, but also very much in the present.
Exactly.
What about quality of life? Would you say Edinburgh is a place where people are generally happy despite the cost?
It seems so, yeah.
Hmm.
Edinburgh consistently ranks high in quality of life surveys, and it's known for having a strong sense of community.
That must be worth something, right?
It seems like it. People are willing to pay a premium for that sense of belonging, I guess.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've tackled London, we've explored Edinburgh.
Now it's time for a double hitter.
Oh, you mean?
Oxford and Cambridge.
Of course. The classic rivals. Two prestigious university cities known for their beautiful buildings, their academic excellence, and
The rather high cost of living?
Hey, yeah, let's be honest, those charming cobblestone streets don't come cheap.
Definitely not. Both cities are incredibly desirable.
And I'm guessing that's partly why they're so expensive?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got the historic charm, the beautiful architecture, that intellectual atmosphere that just permeates everything. People are drawn to that, especially students and academics, but also just anyone who appreciates that kind of environment.
Yeah, it's like stepping into a different world, isn't it? Walking through those ancient colleges, surrounded by centuries of history and knowledge.
It's a very unique experience.
But that experience doesn't come cheap. Our source mentioned that the average rent for a one-bedroom flat in Oxford is about £1,500 per month.
Wow. Even pricier than Edinburgh.
It seems so. And I imagine Cambridge isn't far behind.
You'd be right. They both face similar challenges. Limited housing, incredibly high demand, particularly from students and academics.
So it's that same scarcity issue we talked about with London.
Exactly. But Cambridge has an interesting twist.
Oh, tell me more.
Have you heard of Silicon Fen?
Silicon Fen? I can't say I have. What is that?
Well, it's essentially a mini Silicon Valley right in the heart of Cambridgeshire.
Whoa, okay. What does that have to do with Cambridge?
Well, in recent years, a cluster of high-tech businesses and startups have sprung up around Cambridge. It's attracting a wave of tech professionals and entrepreneurs, which,
Increases demand even more.
exactly. It's putting even more pressure on the housing market and pushing prices upward. It's adding a whole new layer to the demand in Cambridge.
So you've got the traditional academic crowd plus this influx of tech folks. No wonder prices are skyrocketing. So how does the rent in Cambridge actually compare to Oxford?
Well, Cambridge is slightly cheaper, with the average rent for a one-bedroom flat hovering around £4,450 a month.
Okay, so still pretty pricey.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But it seems like Oxford's historic charm, and maybe its closer proximity to London, command a slightly higher price tag.
It's amazing how all these factors play a role, History, academia, technology, even location. Each city has its own unique recipe for high costs. Our source described Oxford as having historic charm, beautiful riverside walks, and an intellectual vibe, and Cambridge is known for its serene beauty and vibrant community. But let's face it, those lovely descriptions don't exactly pay the rent.
They don't, unfortunately.
All right, well, let's move on to our final city on the list, Bristol. This one is described as having creative energy, maritime history, and buzzing nightlife. Sounds like a bit of a change of pace from the more traditional vibes of Oxford and Cambridge.
Yeah, Bristol definitely has a different energy. It's become incredibly popular in recent years, especially among young professionals and families.
I could see the appeal.
They're drawn to its creative industries. It's relatively affordable housing, at least compared to the other cities we've talked about, and its vibrant cultural scene.
Okay, so relatively affordable. What are we talking about here? Can you actually live in Bristol without having to sell a kidney?
Well, the average rent for a one-bedroom flat in Bristol is about £1,350 per month.
So the lowest on our list, but still.
Still a significant expense, especially compared to other UK cities that aren't on this list.
Right, £1,350 is still a lot of money. It seems like no matter where you go in the UK these days, you're going to be shelling out a pretty penny for housing. Our source described Bristol as a cultural and economic hub, and it makes sense, right? People are moving there, businesses are booming, all that activity drives up demand, and that, of course, affects prices. But let's zoom out for a second. Our source pointed to three main factors driving up prices in all of these cities: high demand, limited space, and the unique opportunities each city offers. Which of these factors do you think is the most significant?
That's a tough one. It's hard to isolate just one because they're also interconnected. High demand is fueled by those unique opportunities, whether it's career prospects in London, those cultural attractions in Edinburgh, the academic prestige of Oxford and Cambridge, or Bristol's creative industries. And then you combine that demand with limited space for new housing, and it's a recipe for rising costs. It's that classic supply and demand dynamic in action.
It makes you wonder if there's like a tipping point, Can these cities get so expensive that they actually price out the very people that make them so desirable in the first place? But hey, let's not get too doom and gloom here. Our source actually offers some helpful tips for surviving in these pricey cities without going completely broke.
Oh, good. We need some of those, right?
One of the tips they mentioned is flat sharing. Now, I've heard that's pretty common, especially in London. Is that a realistic option, or are there downsides?
Oh, it's definitely a popular strategy, especially for young people or those who are new to a city.
Makes sense.
It can significantly reduce rental costs, but it comes with compromises, of course. You're sharing your space, you have less privacy, there's always the potential for conflicts with roommates, personalities clashing, and all that. So it's not for everyone, but it can be a viable option for those who are willing to adjust their lifestyle a bit.
Yeah, so it's a trade-off. You save money, but you might have to sacrifice some independence and peace and quiet. What about commuting? Is that a realistic way to save money in these cities?
Oh yeah, commuting is a pretty common choice.
I bet, especially for London.
Yeah. People who work in London often choose to live in towns like Reading, Guildford, or St. Albans, places that offer more affordable housing and decent transport links into the city. Of course, it requires a time commitment. That daily commute can be a drag, but it could be a really smart move financially.
Yeah, escaping those city limits and embracing the joys of public transportation. It's interesting how the cost of living pushes people to get creative with their living situations. What about everyday expenses? Our source mentioned shopping smart. Any specific advice there?
Well, local markets and budget supermarkets are your best friends in these expensive cities. They often have lower prices than the bigger chain supermarkets.
Good to know.
And cooking at home, rather than relying on takeout or restaurants all the time, can make a huge difference in your food budget.
Yeah, that's good advice no matter where you live. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of city life and end up overspending on those everyday things. It's all about finding a balance, right? Enjoying the city perks without breaking the bank. Our source also highlighted the abundance of free activities available in these cities. It's easy to forget about those with all the fancy restaurants and expensive attractions.
Oh, for sure. There are so many free museums, parks, community events. That's a fantastic way to experience the city's culture without spending a fortune.
It just takes a little bit of effort to seek them out.
Exactly. Just a bit of research and an adventurous spirit.
I love that. And it's true, there's always something going on in these cities, and it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. It really makes you think about what you value most and what you're willing to compromise on. Like, would I give up a spacious apartment for a chance to live in the heart of London? Or would I embrace that dreaded commute to enjoy Bristol's creative energy without going bankrupt? Tough choices. So, after diving deep into these 5 cities, what stands out to you as the biggest takeaway?
For me, it's that city life, especially in these super sought-after places, is all about balance. You're constantly weighing those costs and benefits, making choices that align with what you value. And there's really no right answer. What might seem like a dream to one person could be a total nightmare for someone else.
It's all about finding that right fit, right? For your lifestyle, for your budget, for your personality, the whole package. Speaking of finding the right fit, our source left us with this thought-provoking question. What trade-offs would you be willing to make to live in one of these exciting but expensive cities?
Ooh, that's a good one. It really makes you think about what's important to you. Maybe I'd be willing to downsize my living space for that chance to be in London's cultural hub. Or maybe I'd be okay with a longer commute to enjoy Bristol's art scene without completely draining my bank account. It's a personal choice, isn't it?
It is, and there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's about understanding your own needs, what you want out of life, and then making smart choices based on those priorities, what matters most to you. Location, space,
Yeah.
career opportunities, cultural experiences. Once you figure those things out, you can kind of start to navigate those costs and benefits and make a decision that works for you. Well said. This deep dive has definitely opened my eyes to the reality of living in the UK's most expensive cities. It's not all glitz and glam, right? It's about making choices, finding creative solutions, and definitely being mindful of your budget. But hey, even if you're not planning to pack your bags and move to any of these places, it's still fascinating to explore these cities, learn about their unique personalities, and understand the challenges people face.
I agree. It gives you a glimpse into how cities work, the forces that shape them, and the choices people make to build their lives there.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's always more to explore.
Exactly. So if any of these cities have sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to keep digging. Dive deeper into those neighborhoods, compare those living costs, maybe even do a virtual tour online, get a feel for the vibe of each place. Who knows, maybe this deep dive will inspire your next adventure.
That's the beauty of exploration, isn't it? You never know where it might lead you.
Well said. And remember, no matter where your journey takes you, there's always another deep dive waiting for you right here. So until next time, happy exploring!